first of all, you use the phrase cypherpunk. There'll be some people out there that don't know what that means. So let's dig that apart for a moment. So what is a cypherpunk?
Oh, look, I probably wouldn't call myself one per se, but the cypherpunk movement has been around for quite some time, and very much the early days of Bitcoin, I think, originated from that sort of subset of individuals who are very much against the norms, which I guess is where I come into it. But I'm certainly not a developer or a super technical minded person that was trying to build code or anything like of that nature. We'll get that nice and quickly out of the way. But definitely, was interested into alternative thinking and, questioning everything. I just grew up questioning absolutely everything.
Really?
Would love, just everything. Like it was, I just found it so fascinating to like think about things. I know as silly as that sounds, I'm a big thinker. I like to think that's probably like one of the things that makes me very unique is I like dissect everything. And, I came across Bitcoin or anything in my life, and I tend to go quite hard, and I also go quite deep. And so, I think it really spoke to me because it is very edgy. It is very punky. It is very alternative. And once you kind of get roped in by that and go deeper, then you start to understand the substance and the meaning and the properties and the principles that Bitcoin stands on. And that's what really keeps me here.
To dovetail off that, Chris, there's an essay, I've just dug it up from my notes. It's the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto. Timothy May wrote this back in 1988, which is mad. It's a long time ago. But the point is this cypherpunk movement is much older than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is something that came out of it as a result. But these guys for a long time have been talking about, well, what does it mean if we have a digital world? And what does it mean if that digital world is not decentralized? Like, what happens to privacy? What happens to anonymity? How do we control, or not necessarily how can we control, but how do we allow a digital world that upholds freedom of speech, upholds freedom of movement, upholds freedom of trade, freedom of thought? It's so fascinating. I agree. And so when you talk about the attributes here that keep you interested, like what would you say those things are?
I think a lot of the things you just touched on, freedom, privacy, people's personal responsibility, their liberties, all of those things are super important. I think growing up, I sort of learnt to appreciate those things. We're not born with the idea of understanding privacy and having appreciation for all of those things. But over time, growing up, and again through my years of being a punk and being in the band and writing music and basically being disgruntled with life, so to speak, a classic punk story, I explored all of these ideas both internally and externally. And then, Bitcoin came along and kind of said, okay, well, here's a tool that you can use to kind of improve those aspects of your life, improve your privacy, improve your freedom to spend, improve your anonymity, all of those things that you mentioned. Bitcoin helps kind of engage those properties and make your life better for a better lack of term.
And so forgive me if I'm being a bit naive here, but when you think of something that's punky or something that represents punk, why would accountability be part of that? Is that something that Bitcoin taught you, or is that something that I just don't really understand from punk culture?
That's a great question. Maybe I've never actually thought about it too deeply, whether those two worlds collide or not. I don't often talk about these things, to be fair. My older life is kind of more or less separated from my current Bitcoiner life, which is the last decade. But I do think there are natural crossovers and predispositions between those two persons of me, if you want to say. But accountability is really interesting because I think from like a punk lens, it's very fuck you to the system and all of that sort of stuff, and very, anti things. Whereas accountability is, taking responsibility and having ownership of certain things. You could argue that those are at odds with each other. I'm not really sure, to be honest, but certainly accountability in Bitcoin has reshaped my thinking around that, because Bitcoin is a fair system. It is a open decentralized protocol, and with that becomes accountability. Everyone can see that. There's no hidden curtains. There's no things happening behind closed doors. It's all there for everyone to see. And I think that is, at least from a monetary perspective, a much better way to lay down the foundations for a fairer system for all.
Yeah, that's something very powerful, isn't it? The idea of a meritocracy. How do you think of Bitcoin as a meritocracy, and why is it the case? So if someone doesn't really know much about Bitcoin, how would you talk them through that?
Great question. Well, I think because, if we look at it from the fiat perspective, from how traditional finance has worked for as long as I've been born and much longer, it's very much rule makers and people adhering to those rules. And if you don't, then you're punished in some shape or form. Whereas Bitcoin is very much, here are the rules. Everyone can play by those rules. They're publicly known. They're not going to be changed at a whim or at an 11-hour boardroom meeting in some dark room. It's all there. It's all fair. It's all open for everyone to participate. And in theory, anyone can change those rules through the mechanisms in place on the Bitcoin protocol, through BIPs and other mechanisms. So I think that is a much better way to build at least a financial system for all 8 billion plus people on Earth. Whereas what we currently have is very much an unfair system designed to please a few and punish the majority, which, you can see. Everyone can look around anywhere in the world, even first world, third world, anywhere in between. There are problems, and those problems generally do stem from a broken monetary system.
Yeah, it's that lovely phrase that Bitcoin enables a scenario where you're ruled by rules and not by rulers, which helps to kind of simplify it in a sense, doesn't it? Like, okay. And it's also so important because one of the common bits of FUD is like, the insiders, they bought ages ago and now you're just pumping their bags and there's not really any way of changing that. So Bitcoin's unfair. I wouldn't buy Bitcoin. I'd buy this altcoin over here, which I happen to be the insider for, but you might as well get in early because it's, the unit price or the unit bias isn't as bad. You can get one of these for $1 instead of 100,000.